Well, you are all very welcome to the third show, and as you all start making your way in, basically we're going to go straight into it as we always do, and we're going to introduce our guests. So we have the first guest is Fergal McCormick, PKF FPM Accountants, past president of Chartered Accountants Ireland. Hello, Fergal, can you hear me?
Can hear you, Carol, loud and clear.
That's good. That's good. Then we're bringing in Eamon Connolly, Managing Director of Newry Business Improvement District, or BID. Let me try. Have we got it? Hi, Eamon.
Hi, Carol.
How are you?
Good.
We're going to bring in next on the list here is from the Wellcome Woolston Institution for Experimental Medicine, Professor Ulton Power, virologist. If Ulton is there. Hi, Ulton.
Good evening, Carl. How are you?
How are you? And we've got Liz Kimmins, MLA, Sinn Féin politician, who served the membership of the Legislative Assembly for Newry and Armagh, if I can get Liz. Liz?
Hey, Cal.
Hello, Liz. We got it out. I see you got your MLA in the day, just in case your mate starts shouting, you know. So we're dead on. So listen, I want to just start straight into Eamon Connolly. You've been a busy man, basically with the businesses in Newry. Can you tell me there, Eamon, how this is affecting the business in Newry? I'm sure it's a drastic change.
Cahill, we're really in a process of crisis management. Obviously, the world is a different place than it was. So there are things that are beyond our control, and as Fergal said earlier, things that we can control. So there's a process of communication, education, and sharing of problems. There is a range of help out there from
Can you just speak up a wee bit, Eamon? Sorry.
There's a range of help out there from central government, and the challenge with that is getting that delivered on the ground and implemented, because there is processes to follow. So thus far, the first direct aid has been the £10,000 small grant for businesses with an NAV under £15,000. I'm glad to say many people have received it, but I'm dealing with at least 50 cases of those that haven't. And thankfully, we have Conor Murphy locally as the finance minister, and he's been his good offices have helped deal with some of the problems. So it's just a live piece of work, and people just have to bear with the systems being a bit overawed at the minute.
So basically, but this 10,000, so explain for people, I know we're going through this and we've done it before, but explain to everybody, or you are Fergal, who qualifies for that 10,000? Is it just any business, or there's a certain criteria for the business?
No, really what we're dealing with at the minute is a cash flow crisis. So it's really a cash grant to businesses that pay rates. It's 10,000 for those with an NAV under 15,000. There's a larger scheme that's yet to be rolled out for 25,000 for leisure, retail, and hospitality.
And people will find their NAV where on their
NAV will be on the rates bill. If they do not have it, you can actually get it online through the LPS Centre website. And if they're stuck, they can contact us at newry.com, and we will try and help them. There are some anomalies. At the minute, landlords don't apply. There will be a separate scheme launched for landlords next week. Vacant properties aren't covered. Manufacturing isn't covered because they're already rates exempt. People can only claim for one property if they own several under the one business name. And people who are co-workers or rent a chair, say in a beauty salon or hairdressers, can actually claim, but there's a separate process to go for that as well.
Okay. So, Fergal, do you want to come in and anything on that?
No, I concur with everything Eamon has said there, Carol.
Right, okay. And the problem is, Fergal, but it's people, or Eamon said there he's got 50 cases, more or less, and I know of people too that's been in contact, effectively saying that the money hasn't come to them. So, do you think that's just a matter of time? It's just a delay in the system?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I think to be fair, there are certainly some people have got it. We're aware of some that have got it. I think probably it's just the scale of the numbers, but it comes to the fore because there's a major cash crisis out there. You know, businesses need cash. Their revenue in many instances has disappeared, and you know, cash is king. You need it to live and to breathe. Certainly as a business.
Absolutely. And how do you see, Liz, can you come in this? Liz, yes, Liz. Liz, you heard all that, yeah?
Yeah, and I suppose, like what Eamon and Fergal have said, we've been contacted by a lot of businesses over the last day or so too who haven't got it, and Eamon is very clearly outlined some of the reasons there that they have missed out. There's, you know, the economy minister has said in all of this that she will try and fill the gaps where people are falling through the net on this. So we'll hopefully see that over the next few weeks. But we're feeding all those all that information into the department to try and make sure that nobody is missed. It's a very fluid situation. I said this last week too, Cahill, that we're fighting it as we find one solution, then there's 10 or 15 or more queries coming out of it where other people don't necessarily meet that criteria and aren't getting the support that they need to keep their heads above water. One of, I suppose, the bigger ones that I've been dealing with this week is where there's people who don't qualify for the £10,000 grant because they're over the rates limit, and they don't qualify for the 25,000 grant because they don't fall into retail, hospitality or tourism. Yet they've been instructed that they have to close because they're a non-essential business, and that they're not manufacturing anything like that. There's a lot of the leisure facilities have had to close, for example. So that needs to be addressed, because we're coming out the other end of this. We don't want to see the closure of businesses, particularly those who've been here for a long, long time, worked really hard to get to where they are, and are now facing, absolutely no cash flow in all of this. So it's just to assure people we're feeding that in as well, and Eamon that would be in contact with us as well to make sure that we're well informed about how this is affecting businesses. There's no easy fix at this stage, but as I said, we're only about 2 to 3 weeks into all of this mess, if that's what, for want of a better word. But so it is very fluid, and at times I feel we're nearly firefighting. But hopefully in the next couple of weeks we will start to see things settle, and people will know better where they stand.
So really, that's the 10,000. So that's that small business with under what is it, a rateable value or a NAV of 15,000? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So next on it, what about everybody that's over that?
Well, as Liz has already said, Cal, the 25,000 one is restricted basically to people who have a net annual value between 15,000 and 51,000, but it only covers specific sectors, which are basically retail and hospitality and tourism. So it doesn't cover other sectors.
Right, okay.
And leisure, there's a debate over leisure, whether leisure comes in or not, or what part of leisure may come in.
What's happening there, Eamon?
The challenge there is LPS don't actually have a definition in their database of what leisure is. And the LPS database itself is a fundamentally flawed document. So we're 15 love down before we start. So basically, as Liz says, we're looking at it on a case-by-case basis. And if people are falling through the cracks, feed it into ourselves. We're in daily calls to deal with the anomalies and try and find solutions.
Okay. So employees then, furloughed, Fergal, my new word that I've learned again, and again, we're going back through it again.
And believe it or not, Cal, spelt furlough, but I now believe pronounced furlough.
Oh,
now,
furlough.
Believe it or not, but spelled FURLOUGHED, but pronounced. Somebody corrected me, believe it or not. I got a few phone calls after the last evening to tell me that it's actually pronounced furlough. But there you
go. And again, if you just give a quick run there for people out there, exactly what a furloughed person is.
Well, basically, what it is, the government brought in a scheme whereby a business could furlough its employees up to a maximum of 80% of £2,500. Now, there have been some further guidelines in the last few days, and one of them is quite important in that they've now clarified that employers NIC and that £2,500 plus employers NIC and plus the automatic enrolment pension are both included. Now, there's a number of important things to appreciate, Cathal, and there are this. Number one, if you're furloughed, you can't work. That's really important. You cannot work if you're furloughed. And number two, it's important to appreciate that you must be on the payroll before the 28th of February. So unfortunately, if you come to the payroll in March as a new employee or your salary goes up, tough luck. It's based on the payroll in February, albeit there's a few instances to assist if you only came on the payroll in February or whatever. You can look at averaging, but the bottom line is, in simple terms, you've got to be in the payroll in February. Now, they did bring in one further, I think actually it was a question that came up in one of your programs, one of our programs. They've brought in a further concession now for the self-employed. And for the single company owner company. In the past, there was a doubt whether that person actually could qualify for a furlong worker. It's now confirmed they can qualify, and the reason is they're deemed not to be working, but they can still carry out their director's statutory responsibilities and file accounts, etc. So they've made a differentiation between employment and your statutory responsibilities.
Right.
Again, that's quite important because we would have a lot of small companies in the Newry, Greater Newry area who would be family owned and one or two directors from the family involved. In terms of the self-employment, to be fair, as we highlighted the last day, the key there was based on average profits over the previous 3 years in your tax. And if you remember, your tax returns, and they give an extension for 4 weeks. And the big issue there is, to be fair, that the first money is not expected to become available until June. And that is a big pressure in business, and that's forcing some people to go down the loan scheme. And we'll come back to that maybe in a second. I suppose, to be fair, Cal, we should also qualify in terms of the furlong scheme, back to the employee again, that once you're furloughed, you're furloughed for 3 weeks. But a business may not furlough all its employees, as we said the last time. It may furlough some. It will have to look at, for example, assessing what it believes the market needs for its services or products are. And there could be some areas of the business that would be busy and others that won't. But there's a 3 week there's a minimum 3 week period. So once you are furloughed, you have 3 weeks. Thereafter, you can review it again, but it happens in blocks of 3 weeks.
Right, okay. So you just touched on it there with people like going by the profits over the last 3 years. Let's call a spade a spade. There's a lot of small business people out there, Eamon, you'll know this too, and they're showing very little profit at all over a year. Am I not right?
That's very tough. You're very right, Carol. But the issue there is, if they had no profit, how did they live? Because if your income doesn't exceed your expenditure, you can't live. And unfortunately, what this is doing is, and it is very unfortunate, is that it's looking for people who have a track record of showing that their income exceeds their expenditure.
Yeah. But effectively, Fergal, there's nothing then for them people out there. Their past is coming back to haunt them to a certain degree, and they're not going to have any grant or any form of grant if that's the basis of it. There's no other route for them, is there?
I mean, in terms of the both the employee and the self-employed scheme, no. The other route obviously is universal credit.
Universal credit.
They go and claim universal credit, but there is an issue whereby he did bring in a 4 week extension. So if you haven't done a tax return, and you believe that perhaps in the last year it's been a bit different to the previous years, that your income has exceeded your expenditure, that's something you may look at.
So the advice would be go to your accountant, talk to your accountant, and make the right decision based on that. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, look, I think we all recognise there are issues there, and I'm not trying to deny. I think you're referring to the black economy. To be honest with you can't really legislate for the black economy, and I think we have to accept that.
Yeah, I mean, there's just other things that come, and as you know, we've the different platforms there. So asking the businesses, several shops, will they qualify for the 25,000 grant? You or Fergal, let me answer that one.
The story on the 25,000 is, so you have to have an NAV greater than 15,000 and less than 51, and you have to be in retail, hospitality, or leisure.
So back to that again.
Yeah, so if you have one property that qualifies in a business, you will get that. If you have two, you'll still only qualify for one. Now, if you have separate trading entities, you can qualify for more via those separate trading entities, as long as you have separate ratepayer and property IDs.
Right, so as long as you have separate ratepayer,
so it's
property
one
ID.
trading entity.
Right, okay, fair enough. So hopefully that should answer that too there as well. The mortgage payment, the mortgage holiday. Someone's saying that the mortgage holiday is not all that it's made out to be, that everybody thought effectively, but the banks is going to charge interest on it and it's going to be added on, and people should think twice about taking it.
In essence, that is a 3 month roll up of your interest across the rest of the term of your loan. So you get a 3 month holiday, but you'll effectively pay that money over the rest of your loan. So your repayments over the remainder of your loan will increase to amortize the 3 month break.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, Carl, nobody ever said it was a grant. It is a deferral of your mortgage for 3 months. It's a cash flow
But where does it go for? Is it added on to the very end, or is it added on
Well,
for your
that
next
can
20?
depend on the actual the mortgage provider, but most of them actually what they're doing is what Eamon has said. They're spreading it over the remainder period of your mortgage. But this depends on the individual lender. They have some discretion, but some may add an extra 3 months onto your mortgage. But our experience has been the vast majority are actually wishing to spread it over the remainder period of the mortgage.
I have stopped all direct debits as we've no money coming in, just all going out on wages and bills. What do I do?
I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. And the reason why I don't think that's a good idea is that COVID, hopefully, well, not hopefully, will be temporary. And I think if you haven't got cash, you can't pay them. But there's a balance in between that before you stop them, you should actually go and contact the people who you owe the money to and see is there any payment terms. Because these are going to be the same suppliers, remember, Cal, who you hope actually to use in the future. So I'm not saying you don't cut off, and you certainly should reduce and perhaps stop direct debits for things you're not going to require for 3 months or 4 months. However, just remember that it's far better to approach the people in advance and see what the situation is. I think the policy, and if anybody is saying just go and stop your direct debits, I have to say that's a very foolish policy. It's very short term, and it does not in any way show that somebody is planning to have a business which is going to be in a good position to retrade when it commences again. And more importantly, there's a fundamental issue: is it your credit rating? If you cancel direct debits without getting agreed deferral holiday periods, your credit rating is very adversely affected. So I wouldn't want to be going for a mortgage in a year's time.
Yeah, that's correct. So a furloughed person, but the employer pays the money and gets the 80% back. Isn't that correct?
Yes,
So
that's correct.
if that business then has
Sorry, 80% up to 2,500 based on your February 28th salary.
Right, okay. If that business has a lack of cash and there's no money coming in, then what have they to do to turn to this loan or grant scheme?
Yeah, well, the furlough money, they do hope to be available to come in quite shortly. It hasn't come in yet, but they're hoping it to be coming shortly. But what you would do is, look at your own reserves. And again, I think one of the things this will force us all to think that we don't overly become dependent on debt, though actually we do maybe save a little bit more going forward. But you can and go to your bank and try and borrow in the short term and then repay your bank when you get the furlough money. Now, I have to say I'm also aware of some examples of tremendous cooperation between employees and employers, and employees are not necessarily taking their full furlough money until actually their employer gets paid. They're taking a reduced amount of the furlough money.
Sorry, what about an electrical contractor whose business address is his home, which they pay rates on? Anonymous.
Well, the key there is, Cal, that's very straightforward. The key there is whether that person declares business or domestic rates. And if the person is in a domestic situation, it wouldn't be a business expense. But it's not black and white. But to be honest, most people would prefer that their house is not deemed as a business property. And the reason to do that is you got to remember there's some attractive perks for your main principal residence, and you wouldn't want to lose those perks because you're deeming it not your main principal residence, but actually a business premise. But again, I stress, Carol, that's not black and white. That varies. And I think
is there the company route or the self-assessment route for people like that? No.
I don't understand the question.
If somebody's getting their self-assessment, is that not really they're putting in their own tax return? There's money going to come for that too, is there not?
Yes, that's the self-employed scheme.
Yeah. So sorry, Liz, can I just jump in here? Kirsten, what community structures are in place in Newry to help families? Friend texted said there's no money, only £80 for family with 2 kids, and no money in the bank.
Well, the council have just launched the Community Coordination Hub, and there's a number of partner agencies there. They're working along with local government, the Department of Communities, and the Health Trust, as well as sports clubs, community groups, community associations, churches, etc. And basically, it's only launched in the last day or two, but it will be working out of Newry Leisure Centre, and I know in the other ends of the district in Kilkeel and Patrick Leisure Centre. So basically, what it is to organise the deliveries of essential supplies to people. They're working in partnership with some of the food banks and things like that for people to access that. And there is a helpline. It'll be on the council's Facebook page and their website there. Advice NI are managing the helpline. It's running 7 days a week from 9 to 5. If they need to access support, to give them a ring, and it's anonymous. And I mean, we've seen a lot of community groups and that are doing really great work over the last couple of weeks. And sometimes there's people maybe not able to access that, so it's something that people who are really in need can access anonymously, and hopefully they'll get the support they need. Because I think in all of this too, we forget we obviously there's a lot of people who can't get out of their houses, but we also forget there's a lot of families. As one of the examples you said there's no income, well, little or no income at this stage, and unfortunately are now having to rely on the likes of food banks and things like that to keep food on the table. So it's not always an easy thing for people to go and access that and do it in a way that people have pride and dignity too and don't maybe want to. So the council have come together with all partner agencies to try and make that as easy as possible for everybody in need to access. So that's just up and running, and if people do want to look into it, it's on the council website. I can provide you with the details as well, Cahill.
Just give us
want to put it up on your Facebook.
Just on that, a food bank of Whitegates Community Association, and they're just requesting there are some things for people to put in tins of beans, soups, etc. Like that. I know people's all well-meaning in that, but it's brilliant and it needs to be done, obviously, with the people that's there, because as I told you before, my wife has gone past where people has a food bank that's now effectively closed. So then people, I don't know what they're going to do. But at the same time, we have to be careful in terms of, maybe going around and giving out this foods, and we need certain criteria. I know that when I reached Professor Ultenhar, I'm sure he was going to say something like about how this virus spreads, and we need to be very careful that what good we're doing, we're not undoing it by maybe, going up to houses with food hampers, which I've already said that other, without mentioning, as I say, other clubs, and we're not saying they're doing that, we're saying Whitegates is a brilliant job, and I know the people involved there, and they are fantastic, and they're just saying that the community association, is trying to gather up, beans and some soups and stuff. We want to start to give them all out this weekend, and I think we'd all agree that there needs to be certain criteria put in place in that, and we'll move on. We'll go back to the business end of it. Was there anything else just before on the business or money or anything like that, Fergal, that you want to say that we didn't? We know we've got the rates holiday, we've got the
the 3 months rates holiday, also obviously the VAT deferral, and then we have the loan scheme. Now, to be honest, there has been a fair bit of criticism of the loan scheme, and the reason there's been criticism is you may have even read in the national media today where the Chancellor is now expected to make, the UK Chancellor is expected to make a new statement tomorrow, and the reason there's been criticism is that there appears to be the fact that in many instances when people go to their banks, they may be finding the banks are saying that initially they're not eligible for interest-free loans, and the reason for that is that in the original initiative that was announced, it said, first of all, you had to be a viable business before COVID-19, but equally it did say that in the first place that the bank should try and see have the other options open to you, which means their existing products, or if you'd spare equity and assets, etc. So in a number of cases, banks have been saying, and financial institutions to companies, you're not really eligible because you have capacity to borrow on assets, or you have capacity. So it's believed tomorrow, which is a very significant thing if it happens, that the Chancellor tomorrow is going to issue a very significant new statement. And what he's going to say is that he's going to eliminate the requirement for banks to first assess whether SMEs have other means of borrowing. Now, that's very significant. And what he's going to do is he's going to say actually that, which I think was the spirit of initially, but he's saying any viable business up to a turnover of 45 million will be able to gain access to the loan scheme, which obviously is very attractive because it's interest free for 12 months and then you can repay it back over 6 years. But Cathal, there's been a number of interesting developments parallel to try and help businesses and employees. For example, in the UK they've just announced that all workers will be allowed to carry over up to 4 weeks of unused leave into the next 2 years. So what that means is if people say had a financial year end of say March, April or May, and maybe people were saying to them, well, you have to use up your holidays before that date, that's quite a significant perk to employees. You also have Intertrade Ireland. Intertrade Ireland obviously based at the old gasworks. They've just announced 2 new schemes today, believe it or not. One is called, I think, an Emergency Business Solutions Scheme, which really is to help businesses. You have to be an Intertrade Ireland client on their various programs, but it's £2,000 to help you to retain a consultant to help you in any way now in the cash crisis. It's a very interesting scheme, very quick help scheme. £2,000 or €2,500, and they've also introduced a new scheme called eMerge, which is to help companies actually develop their capacity to do online sales or e-commerce. You also have a significant change announced earlier this week that many businesses would have been familiar that they had to bring in Making Tax Digital for their VAT returns. That has now been deferred for a year to April 2021. You also basically now have announced yesterday actually that there's now been an extension given to company, a 3-month extension to companies in terms of filing their accounts. So these are all parallel things, but they all add up. And certainly we are seeing, maybe Ian will confirm this, but I think we're seeing practical evidence that many HP providers are allowing deferred periods of 3 and in some cases up to 6 months on term loans or indeed HP loans, asset loans.
Right, okay. So see the likes of rates there, Eamon, just on that. If somebody has actually fell behind a wee bit of rates, does that affect them?
There are issues at the minute with people who are in rates arrears not getting paid, and that's one of the topics of negotiation where we're trying to offset the grant or defer the arrears because often they're the people most in need.
Right, okay. And Liz, do you want to add anything?
I think Eamon will be the first to admit, Cathal, we have to be clear here that that's a further clarification or concession is being sought, and hopefully it'll come, but the actual scheme itself said March, April, May.
March, April, May. And just on that, with the banks and that, when people's looking for the mortgage holiday as such, I think was pointed out last time by Councillor Casey that actually these mortgage holidays are not something new, they were always there before. But the helplines or the phone lines for to get it done, obviously people have passed that and their payments have come out. Is it your understanding that they still get 3 months from after that, or is it now just down to 2 months if they've missed their payment? Does anybody know the answer to that?
They're entitled to 3 months, but it's a case-by-case basis. In essence, the banks are swamped. I know one bank had 1,000 requests for payment holidays in the first week, and effectively the banks aren't advertising it, but they're largely closed looking after their own customers. So that's part of the reason the new business interruption loan scheme hasn't rolled out. They're actually dealing with trying to sort their own customers. So there is a resourcing issue there in the banks going forward. What I'm seeing is there's 2 issues. There's number one, a cash flow issue. How do we get cash to businesses, what these initiatives are aimed to do? And then there's also a health and well-being issue where several business owners are actually in trauma and shock and are not able to think straight. And that's why some of those initiatives Fergal talks about consultancy support will be very useful going forward.
Yeah, that's agreed. Liz, do you want to add anything to that before I...
No, I think most of it's covered there. As I said, any issues, feed them into us because it's important that we're getting them into the departments and give them a chance to maybe rectify them. We're trying to look at ways of resolving it for everyone.
Maybe we'll go back at the very end and we'll ask Fergal and Eamon and that to maybe, sort of summarise in what way they feel business should go forward. But just on Liz, last time we spoke, the accident and emergency had just been announced that it was closing in Newry. What else is happening in Newry? Is there going to be test centres sorted out? What about all this personal protection equipment? Has everybody got it? Do we know anything about it? Your colleague Connor is working on stuff like that, no?
Yeah,
What's
I
happening?
suppose, they're two of the biggest issues at the minute. Cathal, PPE in particular. Myself and many others are being lobbied by not just the healthcare staff, but people out in caring in the community and care homes, etc., who don't have adequate PPE. As you mentioned there, Conor Murphy, in his role as finance minister, has been working with the Irish government to secure a very large order from China. And the
Yeah.
reason for that is it's not that there's no money there. The money's certainly there to get it. It's just the supply is the issue. As you can imagine, every country in Europe, and I suppose we're across the world, but particularly around Europe, we're all looking at the same lines of supply for this. Everybody's in a similar situation. So Conor, his initiative was to look outside of that and see where we can go, because essentially there's a fear that the supply lines that everybody's using are likely to dry up at some stage. We're heading into the spike of this. So as I said, they've secured quite a large shipment. It hasn't actually arrived here yet. So, and hopefully at that stage it'll make sure that everybody has what they need and will have more than enough to do us for a significant period of time. But in the interim, as I said, you mentioned testing there. Testing, we've been saying for weeks, we need to test, and I'm sure.
Well, I'm going to bring in Professor
would agree with
Alton
that.
Parr here, Liz, just to actually ask him, because as you know, over the last 2 or 3 shows, we're talking about a virus, and I'm not saying that he knows the answers, because we obviously haven't got a cure and they're learning out about this all the time. So, but the best we can do is to pick his brains and say, Professor Alton Parr, can you tell us, tell us about the virus. Tell us about this virus, please.
So obviously the virus is a new virus. First case was described in 31st of December 2019, and that's why it's called COVID-19. It originated in Wuhan, in a live animal market. It's kind of called a wet market. And from there, it looks like it derived from bats originally, through a pangolin anteater. And then subsequently, the pangolin anteater was in this wet market. And it obviously infected and jumped from there then to humans, or a person. And from there then the virus was sufficiently adapted to humans to allow it to be able to transmit from person to person. So this idea is called zoonosis, where the virus starts in an animal and then transfers to humans. It's a relatively infrequent event, but when it does happen, it is of huge concern, because this, in many cases, is a brand new virus that the human population have never seen before. And this is the worst case. The worst fears that we have is that it's capable of transmitting easily from person to person, right? So we have a situation in many other viruses, which I'm sure you've heard of, like Ebola virus, which also is a zoonotic virus. It's originated also in bats, but that doesn't transmit as easily from person to person, and it only transmits when people are highly symptomatic. The big issue with this new coronavirus is that it transmits even when you're not symptomatic. So if you don't have symptoms, it can still transmit from person to person. So there are people walking around in the community who probably feel perfectly fine, but they're actually bringing the virus with them all over the place. And this is the importance of the social distancing and the lockdown that's being called for, because it's really the only way we can control the transmission of the virus in the absence of very, very comprehensive and extensive testing within the community.
So effectively, Italy's death toll 3 weeks ago was 1,266. I've been handed this here, right? Italy's death toll 3 weeks ago, 1,266. Today, it's 13,915. I think it's 115,000 confirmed cases. Did we not see this thing coming?
And just on top of that as well, Carl, I just noticed coming up on my computer, we've just hit a major grave milestone, is that 1 million people are now confirmed worldwide as being confirmed cases of COVID-19. So this is a really big, big deal. It's been my concern for many weeks now. First of all, we saw it in Wuhan, right, where the epidemic grew out of control.
Yeah.
And the medical folks in Wuhan were shouting at us. I mean, they were shouting, please be careful, because with these kind of viruses that transmit so easily, and the fact that you can move from China to Belfast with less than 24 hours, you can see how quickly the virus is capable of spreading. And that's exactly what has happened. Italy then were attacked by the virus, and they never took it seriously. I mean, initially, the government were introducing the various control measures, but Italians being Italians, they kind of ignored them, said, nah, it's not going to bother us, right? And so it took the longest while for them to actually sit up and take notice that, you know, there's quite a lot of people dying here, and we really need to listen to what the people in China were telling us, okay? And then we come further afield from from Italy. So we had people from Italy screaming at us in the UK and in Ireland saying, listen, take this really seriously. And I don't think we really took it seriously for the longest time. And we were always trying to get this balance of, is it a major economic problem? Which it undoubtedly is. I mean, the consequences are very, very severe economically, and nobody will ever say otherwise. But this is primarily a major public health issue where a lot of people are going to die, and a lot of people are going to be ill, and a lot of people are going to be infected. And that, to my mind, because it was so grave in Wuhan, in China, and the Hubei region, and because it was so grave in northern Italy, it was necessary for us really to sit up and take notice and act accordingly. The quicker we acted and the quicker we implemented controls, the better we would have been able to control. You know, you talk about flatten the curve, but if you never allow the curve happen in the first place, you don't have as big an issue. So this has been why it's been such a major problem to deal with. Now we're dealing with catch-up, which again, I still think in Northern Ireland, and I think in the Republic probably also, we're still at an early enough phase where if we have the right implementation, we can probably contain this without causing as much damage as what's going to happen, for example, in London, or what's going to happen in the US. New York is devastating at the moment. You know.
Well, again, as someone with a lack of knowledge, all I heard was the World Health Organization kept on saying, test. What was it? Test, isolate, and trace. All I'm saying is, why are we, you know, why have we not been testing? So I know you brought up that Italy basically said, it'll not do it, but did we not have an attitude here? Did the UK government, like for instance, there's two questions that come to me. Why do we not have an all-Ireland approach to this, number one? And secondly, the UK government, did they not do much the same? Like there was horse racing going on. There was Italians flying into UK, like, you know, as a virologist. And again, I'm going to ask you, how does it actually transmit? And I'm talking about, like, I know, again, there's so many stories, but I want to know, is it in the air outside my door? But leave that for a wee second. Why is it, like you said about Italy, and what happened in Italy, did we not look back and do the exact same? We're letting people go into horse racing. We were letting rugby fans who, when we cancelled the rugby game, come on over and then start congregating in the pubs in Dublin. Are we crazy?
So I kind of, the kind of image I like to portray on this, it's, I don't know if you're familiar, and maybe your listeners or viewers are also familiar with it, with a huge long train in the States. And the track is about 50 miles long, but you can see the headlight that far away. And you think, that's never going to come near me, right? And it's only as it's coming closer and closer and closer, you say, oh dear.
Soldiers.
Right, we're in a bit of bother here, right? And so because it's so far away, it's really difficult, unless you're right in the thick of it, to comprehend what's actually happening with the transmission of the disease. And that's unfortunately the case, that we haven't learned quickly enough to deal with it, contain it, and make sure it doesn't get out of control in the community.
But again, Alton, I will say to you, I watched the film the other night. What do you call it? The
Contagion.
movie? Contagion. When was it? How old is it?
That's probably about 2012 or 2013 or thereabouts, yeah.
And when I watched it, it could have been like looking outside the door in the same story, not touch this, not doing that, taking the people, trying to isolate them, trying to find out, tracing them. I'm saying virologists around the world and people like yourself and research and that we're doing, you know, again, I'll go back to saying it. When this happened in China, was it that there was lack of money? Was it the government didn't put money into these things? Like, are you working on something like this all the time? What actually happened on this? I know it's just...
So Yes, and yes, I have been working on respiratory viruses now for almost 30 years. So the virus I work on all the time is a virus called respiratory syncytial virus, and this virus, RSV for short, and this virus causes bronchiolitis in young kids and
Right.
pneumonia in the elderly. So it's the virus that's responsible for the greatest number of lower respiratory tract diseases in the world for young children. So it's a serious problem worldwide. The numbers involved, it kills about 150, 60,000 infants and kids every single year. Okay, so even though there's a lot of mediatization about coronavirus, and it is a big issue and it's very, very worrying, it's still a little bit behind RSV so far in terms of the number of kids that die every year with it. And it also infects between 30 and 60 million people every year. So, this is the kind of stuff that I work with all the time. And what we do in the lab is we try to get a handle on why some people get seriously ill and die of this virus, and other people walk around very, okay. They have no problem. They cope with the infection very well. So this reflects very much what's happening now with the coronavirus. We know that obviously quite a lot of people are dying with this.
Yeah.
We know also that mainly younger people are walking around and they probably have little or no symptoms. So we're trying to figure out.
Tell us, Professor, how does this virus work? Now, in my lay terms,
Okay, so the virus will be transmitted through droplets. Okay, so if you're coughing and spluttering, the virus you will release it from your body. And if you're within a meter of though that individual or somebody else is within a meter, they can breathe in those droplets, or alternatively, the droplets will fall to the ground and contaminate the area around that individual person. Or they cough into their hands and then go and open a door, right? So then the next person comes out, opens the door in the same area, contaminates their hands, and then starts going up their mouth, nose, or eyes, and they will begin to become infected by the virus. Once the virus then gets into the body, it will attack cells in the lining of the airways. So this is called the airway epithelium. And it will start multiplying within those cells and then release those multiplying viruses, and they will infect other cells, and progressively more and more cells will become infected. From that infection in the upper respiratory tract, then it will progress down into the lungs, into the lower respiratory tract, where then again it will replicate. And what happens is then the virus, when it replicates, the cells pump out these small little protein molecules that are basically alarm bells that tells the immune system, I'm under attack, please come and help me, okay? And what happens then is the immune system is turned on. Most of the time, it's turned on in a way that, it controls the virus, gets rid of the virus from the body, and everything is fine. But occasionally, and this is what happens with a lot of the individuals that are dying, is that the immune system becomes far, far, far too active. And we get this massive inflammatory responses that causes a lot of damage to the lungs. And therein lies the problem. So essentially, when we're looking for cures for this, we need to find one that will stop the virus replicating. And we also need to find one that will dampen down or reverse the inflammatory response that we see following infection.
So effectively, see things like grocery online parcel you're talking about that is in droplets, are they high risk?
Generally speaking, not. Now, you have to take into consideration that the actual number of people that are currently infected in Northern Ireland is still quite low. I mean, there's some estimates, maybe 30,000 people, maybe 60,000 people might have the virus. So it's still
how do we know that? Sorry to interrupt you, but how do we know that? We're not testing.
No, but it's an estimate. So there's this association between the number of people that are dead at any given time. So we know approximately 1% of individuals die or that are infected. Right. We know also that it takes about 17 or just over 17 days on average, for somebody to be exposed to actually dying of the virus. So we know that 17 days ago or thereabouts, there would have been 100 times whatever number is dead today. Okay, that's assuming that there was no intervention, as is the case at the moment. So, for example, say there was 20 people dead today. That meant 17 days ago, there was like 2,000 people already infected. And then we know that the virus spreads at a rate of doubling time of just around 6 days, although we see the data from New York now suggesting that it's doubling every 3 days. So every 6 days, then you count, we go from 2,000 to 4,000 to 8,000, and you can multiply up then from the number of people that are dead, how much you're likely to have today in terms of the infected, the actual infection.
Right. And from our position now at the minute, you know, people saying they're maybe getting a wee bit bored in their homes and sticking in, and we've got this policy, stay in, wash your hands and that. How important is that then?
Critically important. And I was very disturbed in one sense. So can I just compliment the vast majority of people who are actually, sticking with this, because it's so important. And I think hats off to those folks that are going along with the recommendations. I am concerned about the other 34% or thereabouts who are not involved. Now, I suspect a good lot of those are going to be key workers, like healthcare workers that, they need to be in work. I mean, clearly, I'm in work, because we need to get the research done, right? But if there are folks that are, going around, walking around town, going to coffee shops or whatever, if they're there or, mixing together, they're not taking this seriously. And this is a grave concern, because the only way that this virus can continue to propagate and continue to transmit is if somebody infected interacts with somebody who's not infected. It's very simple. There's no rocket science in it. You're infected, you will pass it on to somebody uninfected if that person is close to you or within your environment, okay? This is why, for example, at home, if you get infected, the chances are everybody in your home will become infected. But if we keep that social distancing as much as possible and for a reasonable period of time, say, for example, 2 weeks, those people that are in isolation, even if they become infected and no symptoms, within that 2-week period, their immune system will kick in and will kick the virus out, okay? We'll kill all the virus that's in the body. And after about 2 weeks or so, you will no longer be capable of transmitting the virus. So we've contained the virus and we've made this person immune and not able to transmit any more virus. If, on the other hand, we don't take that seriously and people are milling around, like those people who don't have any symptoms or very mild symptoms, they will transmit the virus from person to person. So very simple formula, keep the distance, the virus can transmit. In that 2-week period then as well, a certain number of people will get the actual disease, okay? So they'll be sick and some of them will require hospitalization. So then we know who those individuals are, and then we can do what's called contact tracing to determine who they have been in contact with for a period of time. And once we know that, then we can find out who are the likely people who are going to be infected in the next 2 weeks. Okay, and that then tells us then if those are in isolation, and these could be healthcare workers, for example, that would need to be in isolation for a fixed period. If this isolation happens, then those people again cannot transmit the virus to somebody else if they are not interacting with people who are not infected, who are uninfected at this time.
So in terms of the north of Ireland, as you would say, then the most important people to get tested is the health workers. The rest of us have to stay at home as much as possible, where you say the virus will die out or else people will die. Isn't that it? But we can't afford to have the health workers. So would you say that that was something that was missed? I know there's no point crying over spilt milk, but effectively we should have these tests in place. There's people up there working now, we all know, that's in hospitals, and they also could be spreading it. Never mind that they're getting it themselves, they could be spreading it.
Absolutely. For example, if you have the current testing regime is that you test people who have symptoms, right?
Yeah.
And if we know that 60% of the people don't have symptoms or very mild symptoms, they'll never be tested. So they could possibly be bringing the virus to work with them and infecting their colleagues, and we'll never know about it until those healthcare workers start developing symptoms. So yes, the problem is related to the fact that the testing capacity in Northern Ireland is quite low, okay? So we don't have the capacity, and I know I've talked to my colleagues about this who are in the virus reference lab in the Royal Victoria Hospital. Their capacity is limited just by virtue of the fact that this is an unprecedented situation. They're well equipped to do what they do on a routine basis, but we're no longer in routine basis. And therefore ramping it up becomes it takes time. It's not a question of just waving a magic wand and saying, we're going to do this and we're going to get it done. It does take time to procure. We heard Liz earlier talking about the difficulties of procurement, trying to get stuff into Northern Ireland. And this is a major issue, that if those reagents are not available, or the supply chain is disrupted because of the massive international requirements, it's difficult to ramp up and get those on stream. So it's happening now. I know a lot of my colleagues are being involved with it. There are people who are not even virologists, but they will be involved in the testing. So there's a huge effort going on.
Yeah.
But
on that, someone is text. I'll not mention the name, sorry again. But Liz, there's a company, I think they're from County Antrim, and apparently they've got testing kits that came up today in Stormont Health Committee. Health Minister Robin Swarn, has he clarified why they haven't been ordered? I don't think you're really in a position to answer that, but I have heard this story that there is a company in the north of Ireland that can produce these, but we're not banning them.
I think
crazy.
And it was actually Conor Murphy had actually mentioned this in his update this evening on the Executive Daily Update. He was in attendance there today. It's crazy. We've been saying for the past number of weeks exactly what you've said there, exactly what Ultan said, the need for testing, particularly frontline workers. Not only is there a risk of them carrying it, but we've also workers who are self-isolating because they have symptoms, but may not necessarily have this virus, which has taken them out of the health service, which is already stretched. So, there's so many reasons why we need to test. The World Health Organization said, if you're not testing, you're dealing with this blindfolded. We don't know where it is. We don't know. We haven't got accurate figures of how many cases there are. So it's ludicrous. But what you've said there, Cathal, is you've hit the nail on the head. There's a company in the north of Ireland, not that many miles up the road, that are making these tests. And when the health minister was questioned about this today, his response was that this is part of an order through Britain. So basically, and Conor highlighted this tonight, basically what he's saying is that Britain make the order, the company send them to Britain, and then they redistribute them back to here. It makes absolutely no sense. Why would we not be ordering directly from them and having them on site, and getting the test? We need to increase testing capacity. We need testing centres and sites. And particularly, I think our first protocol would be for frontline workers, because if people are going off self-isolating, whether they have it or not, we're going to see a particularly overstretched healthcare system here. So, we really, really need to see this, see action being taken, not tomorrow, but nearly yesterday.
I think it's the same too for the ventilators. Would that be right, Ultan? But then I think you mentioned to me that a ventilator is only one thing. You need the people to be able to operate the ventilators. That's the problem too.
Yeah, of course you do. But I'd say the testing at the moment, the reason there's a pragmatic reasons why they're doing it the way they're doing it at the moment. And the main reason is just the capacity that they have. So they have to choose who are the people they're going to test at a given time. So those current strategies are perfectly reasonable within the capacity that they have. But as Liz said, the need for upping the quantity of testing is absolutely clear. The more people we can test, the more we can find out where the virus is going, the more we have the opportunity of getting a handle on it and actually reversing the outbreak.
Do you see that question there, Ultan? I just put it up because I found it interesting myself. I don't know if you can see it or not, but this virus have been in north of Ireland in February. Personally, know a lot of people unwell in February. I caught part of your conversation earlier where you said up to 30,000 people could have it. I think effectively what you're saying by that is that it's already here. It's already outside our door in people.
I wouldn't quite say outside your door. Hopefully it's all inside your door with everybody in lockdown.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
What about this here? Was it here in February?
In terms of February, the evidence suggested it probably isn't, because we were able to trace the first people, or my colleagues were able to trace the first introduction here. Bear in mind that this is coinciding with lots of other respiratory infections, and we know, for example, that flu was rampant at that time. So a lot of people would have these kind of symptoms, would be flu-like symptoms at that time. So it's unlikely that it was the COVID-19.
Right. Okay. Just on that. Losing your sense of taste. What was it? Sense of taste? Is that one of the symptoms? Yeah.
Smell.
Smell and taste is one of the symptoms. Yeah.
Yep. There's more and more evidence to suggest that is the case. In fact, there was there was a study published online there yesterday I think it was, in which they looked at 1.2 million people, and they basically, the individuals were replying to an app on a daily basis in terms of their symptoms. And when they went back through the data, they found that of the individuals that actually were tested positive for COVID-19, for the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes it, 59% of them had an acute loss of smell or taste or taste. Right. So that was fairly convincing evidence that this is part of the symptomology of the COVID-19. My concern is that GPs are not aware of this, or they have a recommended list of symptoms that they say, if you're on this list, you need to self-isolate. But if you have this loss of smell or taste, it's not on the list, so therefore you don't have COVID-19, you can go back to work. I think it's pretty self-evident what the risks are in terms of sending somebody back to work who is suspected to be COVID-19 positive.
Right, you just broke up at the very end there. You still hear me okay? Yeah, see me okay? Yeah. Just something else which is probably completely out of it. America, the richest country in the world, right? And it's just an observation, because I realized the day I actually wrote it down. The world's richest country, 6.6 million benefit claims recorded last week, which exceeded the week before. You know, Mr. Trump had said that he's going to ride this storm. From a virologist point of view, do you think that boat has started to sail? Do you think they're in trouble?
I'm very concerned. I really am concerned. I think it's going to be one of the worst catastrophes, of perhaps even worse than sub-Saharan Africa. Our concern with sub-Saharan Africa has always been related to the fact that they don't have well-developed healthcare systems. And therefore, if the virus did circulate in, a lot of their shanty towns where there's so many people there, that the death rate could be absolutely phenomenal. But the situation, I'm so surprised with the situation in America and the USA, because we're seeing an absolutely amazing increase in, like, the frequency is doubling every 3 days. I mean, that's way faster than what happened in China. Yeah. And that is leading to a catastrophe. And the idea that you have separate states competing with one another for basic supplies in a pandemic situation that's so catastrophic, that is a recipe for disaster. This needs to be coordinated very carefully with everybody on board, all speak in the same way and with the same objective, and all coordinated at the federal level in order for it to be successful. So I'm really concerned for my colleagues in the States, for family that I have in the States. I'm sure, all of us in Ireland have family somewhere along in the States. I'm really concerned of the way it's been adapted. The other big issue for me, as I say, we came back to it earlier, about the balance between the economic impacts and the public health impact. And some countries, notably the US and perhaps to a lesser extent the UK, have put that balance more towards the economic devastation rather than the public health devastation. And the consequences of that strategy is evident to see now, I think, in terms of what is likely to pan out, or what is panning out in the US at the moment.
So on that there, Liz, just for our own area and for everybody that, the people in the greater Newry area, what would you like to say to them there? Before we sort of finish with the guys in terms of Eamon and Fergal, in terms of business and that, what would you say to people in Newry, to the health workers and to just ordinary people that's gone through a very tough time at the minute and they can't really tell where the light is?
Yeah, I think, first of all, just to commend all those frontline workers. As I said, we're not getting through this without them. The healthcare workers, I said it last week, the lorry drivers, the retail workers, right across. There's so many people there that are going out every single day and doing their job, and it's only for them that we're surviving this storm, I suppose. But I suppose for the wider community, keep doing what we're doing. Stay at home. If you know anybody in your family that's not adhering to the guidelines, please encourage them, because as Alton has said very, very clearly, this is the key to getting past this and getting through this. You know, our priority here is to keep people well, to save lives, and to keep food on people's table. And if everybody plays their small part, and I think it is a very small part, I know it's very hard to stay at home. It's very, very challenging. I'm working at home with a 14-month-old most days, and I'm telling you now, it's not easy. But you know, think of the bigger picture here. A couple of months down the line, hopefully we'll be through this. In terms of the businesses, you know, in the assembly, we're continuing to do all we can to try and make it easier for people to get through this. But we really do. I think health is the key thing here, because you know, everything else we can hopefully sort out as we go along. But we need to make sure that people are safe and well, and that we all see the other side of this.
So, Eamon,
I think I would just say, echo what Fergal said earlier, not to go into knee-jerk reactions. There's help out there, and to speak to people if you have issues with them in funding or even health. And I know the community hub that Liz is talking about is well structured, and there's important issues there about access NI as well for people getting out and about. So it's talk to the right people and get help, and just it's about working together and trying to get through this, because I suspect it's going to be a long haul.
Fergal McCormick.
Well, I think first of all, Cal, just to clarify one further point on rates. To be fair to the Finance Minister, Conor Murphy, two days ago, he did introduce an adjustment downwards in respect of the regional rates, which will actually reduce rates 12.5%, but in real terms, potentially 18%, I think, based on last year's rates. But I think if we get back to the bigger picture, I think Ultim Power, I must congratulate him for the manner in which he was so succinct. The reality is that COVID-19 is a major threat to human health, and that without doubt is the priority, has to be the priority. Thereafter, we have to acknowledge that it's also a major threat to business, but I stress health has to be the first priority. But in that context, and acknowledging, by the way, that the correct decisions are being taken in Dublin and London and Belfast, really the whole social distancing measures to contain the virus, we have to acknowledge that is having a very major impact, albeit we accept it's correct, but it's having a very major impact on business. And you're seeing that in so many ways. For example, in terms of the revenue side, that's the area you must look at immediately, because if your revenue is disappearing or has disappeared, that is major implications for your business. Secondly, we have to accept, even at this early stage, that it is likely that purchasing trends will differ quite considerably when we get up again in business. I think you'll probably see changes in our attitudes, whether it be to healthcare, whether it be to work-life balance, whether it be to remote working. And businesses must now demonstrate agility to sort of start to plan for these, because the one sure thing we are from the World Health Organization is, and we've got to rely on them, is that COVID-19 is temporary. And what that really means is that the fittest will, obviously, God knows we can't determine what happens to each of us individually, unfortunately, albeit we can do as much as possible to mitigate it and against our families. But there's one sure thing, irrespective of whether we're around, the businesses and the fittest businesses will survive. And it's quite clear that those who adopt now a risk management strategy, which incorporates business continuity plans, which incorporates a range of measures to try and navigate through the current COVID-19 crisis, but more importantly, to try and make sure that their business is in a position to exploit the recovery when it comes. Those are the businesses that will be the fittest and will survive. And in very simple terms, because a lot of this is quite simple at present, this has happened so quick, get out a sheet of paper and simply list the impacts, the current impacts on the back of an envelope that you think there are under 4 headings. Sales, and for example, if you're an online sales, it may not be just as tough. Similarly, staff, you have to look at a couple of things. Number one, there may be doubts about your staff availability. They may become sick. Number two, the social distancing. But again, you have to look at what are the potential impacts. Having already dealt with the market and the demand, then you go to suppliers. And again, what impact is on your supply chain? And again, if some of them are in the worst areas in the world, it'll impact you. And finally, I always say normally, and I do say this normally, without sales, you don't have a business. But just at present, cash is the most important. So you must move from profitability and balance sheets to cash flow. It's very simple. What cash do I have today? What outlays do I have to pay to breathe in the next 4 weeks? And equally, how can I undertake mitigation actions to reduce the stress on outlays and perhaps get some temporary help with inflows? So, really, I don't think we should panic. I think I agree with Eamon. None of us could have guessed or anticipated where we are today, but I'm equally very confident that whilst we can't control what happens around us, we can control how we respond. And I'd also say, Cal, to be honest with you, that our current circumstances do not determine where we go. They merely determine where we start. So therefore, I believe that we working together, whatever that shape will be, but we have to have confidence. The Greater Newry area has come a long way. If we can get the health sorted out and leave that to the health professionals, and we all recognise we need a little bit of luck as well, then I believe we will overcome and there will be a future. But I don't think any of us should in any way undermine the major challenges that lie ahead. There will be major economic wins ahead, which will cause major impacts, which we will not see getting over probably for 3 to 10 years.
Mm. So thanks, Fergal. And at the end of the day, we have to commend local business the way they have adapted and have responded to this. A lot of local businesses could get a hard time, but I think the way they've actually acted and the way they've tried to protect and they've actually taken on board from the point of view that we've all give examples of from Liz last time round, and all of you basically we're all commending business and how they've by and large treated and took care of their staff, and I hope that continues, and I hope that Newry does come together. So on this here, when you're talking about businesses adapting, I will mention this one because I don't normally call out any businesses that come up, but there was Mourne-Dew Distillery obviously have adapted their product. So it's 80% alcohol hand sanitizer in accordance with WHO specification, right? So it's saying it's basically not to be sick, but they have that available. That's Mourne-Dew Distillery from Mourne Point have adapted the product. And again, Fergal, back to what you said, a business been able to adapt and fill a need. They're not looking to make
Look
their
at
only charge. Their own. Sorry.
Look at O'Neill Sportswear. Look at Block Blinds. And more importantly, look at the local. I live in Warren Point. I cannot tell you how impressed I am with the local shops that are doing deliveries now. I cannot tell you how impressed I am with the community in the voluntary sector who are really rallying around to make sure that the vulnerable people and those who really can't leave their homes are getting their main needs dealt with. So I really have to say I only got the highest praise, but I would definitely support what Alton said. If for some reason there's a small minority not adopting a common sense approach, please, for the sake of us all, grow up quick and make sure
that is actually a business from Warren Point, Fergal. So obviously, their award-winning distillery based have rejigged
I'm aware
the distillery.
of them, actually.
Yeah, they've rejigged their distillery to make hand sanitizer. They're basically saying they delivered 2 homes, quantities of 5 litres. hello@moredew.com. There is a number there. Maybe I'll put something up later on. But I do actually admire the way people's coming forward. They're not looking to basically they're said that they're just charging for the ingredients that's in it, the alcohol. They will deliver to people's home, and it's probably something that we all need anyway. But there's comments all coming in there. Listen, I want to thank you all. Sorry, Elton, go ahead.
Interject a little bit, just echo a little bit more what Fergal is saying, in that I fully agree. It's the same here in Belfast. The community activities have been absolutely phenomenal. But if people don't play ball with the regulations and the restrictions that are there now, certain individual group of people don't do this, the longer this is going to drag on for, and then the more economic impacts there will be in the long run. So I think it's really important that there's been a lot of pressure, social pressure, put on folks who are not playing ball with the restrictions that are there and take them extremely seriously. This buys us the time then in research to try and develop the drugs that might be able to treat the disease and or the vaccines that can prevent it. So this is what we're crying out for now, is to give us this time to be able to do the research that will help find solutions to it in the long run. Your mic is off.
Cahill, your mic is on mute. I
Yeah,
think.
that's okay. You can hear me. So thank you all very much. Yeah, thank you for that there, Professor Ulton. I would go back to that to keep on talking about is keep washing your hands. Would not be right, Professor Parr? Keep washing your hands, keep home. If there is
20,
just
30
you
seconds.
and your family at home and you don't go out and meet people, you don't get the virus, correct? You'll
Exactly.
save lives. Maybe you save your or family member's life. Don't listen to that tough talk and it's just a flu. They're more scared than you think. Keep in contact with your parents and your grandparents by phone or video. If you need help with that, any technical, we're here at Destination Newry can help. There's plenty of local newspapers are now online and available. You can sign up for very little money. You can look at it. There's lots of local websites besides us, Newry.ie, Newry Times, Newry Now, lots of interesting things. Do not be afraid to ask anybody for help, which I think Eamon had passed on. I know the likes of Liz and her colleagues are really working very hard, you know. I want to thank again Fergal from PKF, FPM, Professor Parr, Liz Kimmins, MLA, and Eamon Connolly, Bid Newry. If any is out there does have an activity, be it a quiz or fitness, there's a quiz will start for you all directly after this. As you know, we do a live quiz and you're able to answer. You can put it up on your YouTube and your TV and you can answer along with your phone. If you have singing competition, we've got now early morning fitness live with Geraldine. We've got all these different, Fergal's laughing at me here. We've got all these different programs for you tomorrow.
You get the weight off me yet, Cahill?
Sorry, we didn't get you dancing yet, Fergal. No. So it could be live cooking or singing, dancing, small play, a quiz competition, whatever you want. We will try and adapt you and take it on. You know, Geraldine from Sculp will be on every morning, live again from her home, taking us all through. From tomorrow, we've got Jenny Hot Yoga coming in. Newry showing us how to find our inner selves. Mickey Cunningham, can you find your inner self, Mickey? Right. So the 11 a.m. show with Joanne and guests, again a live show Mondays and Thursdays, and lots of few good shows coming up, including one with the stars of Down GAA. So let's all beat COVID-19 together. Not by saying that we know. We don't need to know everything. All we need to do is follow the instruction in this. I think we'll let the people be the experts. Newry, is it Newry.com, Eamon?
Newry.com, yeah.
Newry.com has got information in it. Liz is well-known MLA. You can contact Liz. Fergal from PKF FPM is there. I don't think we can just contact Professor Ulton. Are you actually working on COVID as it is now, Professor?
We started a project today.
Doing?
We're looking for drugs to treat the virus. So these are the project. The project was funded as part of the UKRI initiative, COVID Rapid Response. And what we're looking at is to test FDA-approved drugs. So we have over 1,000 drugs that we'll be testing. And we want to see if they have, on the one hand, the ability to kill the virus, and on the other hand, the ability to block or diminish the inflammatory response that kills many people. So the combined approach hopefully will add something. The fact that they're FDA-approved already means that they will go rapidly then into clinical trials and we don't have to worry too much about toxicity, which is a normal process and adds years to the development process. So this is what we're on at the moment. And, you know, this is why we need the time for people to keep the curve very, very low so that we can actually come up with something that might help with the virus itself.
And I think we've learned through this whole experience that one of the most important things is that people like yourself do need the funding. You know, they're running to you, funding you now. You know, there's money appearing from deep coffers and Mr. Johnson's pocket. And, you know, these things should have been done a long time ago. So whenever you do get that cure, whatever, make sure you come down to Newry first. And, you know, we're not selfish, but there's no problem with it. I'd like to thank you all again and enjoy it. All stay safe.